Greetings, friends, back in Blacksburg and the world over from the Gulf of Guinea off the Ghana coast. That's right, I'm still on the high seas, but I have to do a shout out to all you good peeps. Hundreds and hundreds of you have requested for me to do a podcast on the government shutdown. All right, well, I'll do my best talking about the U.S. government from the Gulf of Guinea, but that's what we do here in world regions. I'm going to be holding on to the computer as best I can to stabilize it, as the winds do pick up from time to time when you're doing 10 or 15 knots through the Gulf of Guinea, heading towards Ghana. So what's up with this government shutdown? Why does it have world repercussions? Why is the whole world watching the intraction, the intransigence, the insanity of the U.S. Congress shutting down its own government and possibly going to cripple the world economy? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I'll start off with that this is a global issue. I typically don't dabble with domestic tranquility or lack thereof in America. I just don't pay attention to domestic politics at all, because we're all about the world, trying to teach you about the world. But in this case, this particular story does affect the United States and the entire world. And I should tell you right off the bat, the entire world thinks that the U.S. is insane. People all over the planet, economists to presidents to prime ministers to working class folks the world over, are looking at what's going on in the United States with disbelief and complete ignorance of what the hell is going on. So you're not alone in that there in America. And I'm talking about people from the conservative spectrum, people from the liberal spectrum. Doesn't matter your political affiliation or taste anywhere in the world is looking at this going, what the hell is the U.S. doing? They're bickering about some little bizarre policy that's shutting down the whole government. It might affect the whole world. What are those idiots doing? Yes, indeed. What are those idiots doing? And that's a question that many of us in America are asking too. What are these idiots doing? I'll kind of break this apart into a couple things. First off is, why is the government shut down? Then why might it get even worse here in another 72 hours if they can't raise the debt ceiling? And then finish off with, what are the unforeseen costs of all of this nonsense? Okay, first off, why is the government shut down? For you Tea Party fans out there, I'm going to be right up front, right honest, okay? If you're a huge Tea Party person, an ultra-fringe right-wing person, you probably want to go ahead and turn this off. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm not even going to really call out Republicans because I like Republicans too much to blame Republicans for this. But if you're going to start looking at what's happening and why are things shut down and why is the U.S. crippled and hobbled right now, you do have to point to a small group of Congress people, mostly in the House, not even the Senate, of Tea Party affiliation or right-wing, ultra-conservative right-wing, I guess, kind of Republican Party affiliation. Again, I hesitate to call them Republicans because the Republicans can't even reel these people in. And most papers and people who are trying to be balanced, have a balanced approach, will play this BS line of, well, it's all of them. All of them are to blame. The people can't get along. The Democrats and Republicans can't get along, and so they all suck. And it's like, well, I usually say that. That's usually the case, but in this case, that's not the case. This is a small group of right-wing radicals within the Republican Party, maybe, that do have this Tea Party affiliation that have basically said, we are going to shut down the government and possibly collapse the entire world economy unless we get what we want. So, okay, so what do they want? They want Obamacare to go away. A law that's already been passed, a healthcare system that's already being implemented. This group of people have decided that it is so evil, that it's so fascist / communist / socialist / I don't even know what they think it is, that it's going to be the end of the United States as we know it. It's going to cripple the United States economically for the future, and therefore they feel like they're fighting the good fight. And by the way, I believe they believe they're right. I don't think anyone's doing this for political gain. I think this group of people truly in their hearts think Obama is evil and is possibly a Nazi. I think some of them have said that, which is pretty radical, stupid things to say, but nonetheless, they in their hearts believe that Obamacare is going to destroy the United States of America as we know it. Again, most people in the rest of the world look at this and say, what? Most other countries on the planet have some sort of healthcare systems. Many of them have far-reaching healthcare systems that are government mandated or government operated or government controlled. The United States is actually in the minority on planet Earth of countries that have nothing. They have no government mandated anything for healthcare. So the idea, and I'm going to pick on the Tea Party folks who are saying this, the idea that the government being involved in healthcare is going to cripple and destroy the United States is bizarre, unfounded, and there's no historical precedent on planet Earth for that being the case. Well, that being said, okay, I respect everybody's opinion and everything, but at some point you have to say, well, what's the reality of this? Is there any reality that this might actually happen? That the whole government system is going to collapse? No, that's not a reality. But they're going to stick by their guns, this radical right-wing part of the Republican Party are sticking by their guns. And I try to empathize. I try to understand. I think their mentality is that the government's broke, that the government's too big, that the government shouldn't be doing stuff with healthcare, that the government already is too intrusive in people's lives. And that's a very conservative ideology. I have no problem with that ideology in particular. But they've taken it to an extreme. And they're saying that they don't want any more new government programs. They don't want any more new welfare systems or unemployment insurance or anything like that. That's all New Deal stuff that FDR did 80 years ago, and they don't like that stuff either. So this is a last gasp of a small fringe group of ultra-conservatives who think the government shouldn't do anything for you, and Obamacare is just one more thing they're going to do for you, and it's going to bankrupt the government. And in doing so, they're saying, here's how we're going to make our point. By the way, this will never happen. They're not going to repeal Obamacare. They're not going to delay Obamacare. It's the central part of this administration's only success story they've had for 5 or 6 years. So it's a dead-in-the-water issue from the get-go. But the fringe is trying to make a point. And they're saying, hey, here's the point. We don't want any new government spending. We want to balance our budget. All respectable ideals. And in doing this, we're going to stop the government from working until you promise not to spend any more money and we get our fiscal house in order, which means that we only spend what money we have coming in. Okay, again, all decent ideals, but here's how they've gone about doing it. See, the House of Representatives and the Senate collectively are called the Congress. And the Congress of the United States holds the purse strings, the money. They pass a budget in which the money can be spent. And therefore, the Congress has the power to stop spending money. And that's exactly what is going on here. They refused to pass a budget a week and a half ago, a budget that allows for the spending of the money for the government to run. They have gone gridlocked on that. Again, it's this fringe group that has filibustered and said, nope, we're not going to allow even a vote to happen on this budget. We're not going to do anything. No one's going to do anything until we get what we want. So they refused to pass a budget a week and a half ago, which means the government don't got no money to spend because the Congress didn't allocate the money to spend. And that's why you have the government shutdown. So point one, that's what the government shutdown is all about. A fringe component of the Republican Party who is essentially trying to say nothing's going to happen until we get what we want, even though they know they can't get what they want. So that's bizarre point number one. The government shutdown means that they don't have the money to continue to operate the government. Now, obviously, not the entire government stops running. Some easy examples of exceptions. The military is going to keep running. The military is not retiring from the current wars that they're involved in. National defense and security ain't going to stop running. So it's selective in what stops running. What can we afford to not have running for the government right now since we don't have a budget to pay the bills? National Park Service. Yeah, there you go. You can't go to national parks. You can't go to the national monuments. 800,000 government workers have been furloughed, which means you have time off with or without pay. We haven't decided yet, so just go home. Non-essential staff, non-essential government stuff is being shut down. That's what the shutdown is all about. Got it? That's why that's happening. They haven't passed a budget to allow themselves to spend money to keep the government going. And again, I keep saying Tea Party. I don't even know if it is the Tea Party. It's this fringe of which there are some Tea Party members, and I guess some just ultra-conservative, ultra-orthodox Republicans are part of this small coalition as well, to just stop everything. And they're saying, and their theory is, who cares? We'll just stop everything, and therefore we'll save all this money, and we won't have to keep borrowing and keep going into debt, because the United States is like $7 trillion in debt. And so they're saying, we're going to be fiscally responsible. We're just going to stop spending money. Okay, well, that can be debated. It can be debated that you're actually losing more money than you're saving right now because you're not getting any revenues that would be pulled in by national parks and visitation to them. You also are hemorrhaging money in multiple places where things are already in movement. And I was talking to some folks on the ship here about this who go to Antarctica a lot. So the government has billions of dollars worth of research in place in Antarctica. The government researches, funds lots of research all over the planet. But Antarctica has a very small window of getting there. It's particularly right now in the summertime when the sun's up. And all of those programs have been put on hold because of the government shutdown. And actually, because you have such a small window to get to Antarctica, they've already been canceled for the whole year. So you have 6 months of research, of Antarctic research, that's already been canceled. And again, maybe Tea Party people are like, yay, we just saved money. Well, no, actually you didn't. You just lost $100 million that was already invested. People were already in place. Supplies had already been bought, and now it's just going to get thrown in the dumpster. So you're hemorrhaging money in certain places. I guess maybe you're saving a little bit here and there. But actually, that's not even what this is all about. It's not about saving some dimes and nickels by stopping national parks from being open. It's about stopping Obamacare because this fringe group sees that as a long-term debt that can't be sustained. Again, there's logical arguments behind what they're saying. The way they're trying to go about getting change, though, is completely ass backwards and will never happen and is damaging the United States in horrific long-term ways. And now let's get to those. See, you thought I was just spinning out of control, but I brought it back. And that's point 2. What's this whole thing about a debt ceiling that's supposed to be passed by October 17th? Uh-oh, that's coming up fast. If it doesn't get passed by October 17th, some economists worldwide are predicting global gloom and doom, an economic crash, the likes of which will be the Great Depression all over again. That's probably extreme. Is it going to affect the United States economy? Yes. Is it going to affect the world economy? Yep. Is it going to affect U.S. credibility? It already has. Okay, so what am I talking about with this debt ceiling? All right, here's the deal. The United States is in debt, as I suggested, about 17 trillion, 16.7 trillion, I think, if you want to be exact. For every $5 the U.S. government spends on everything, the military, the budget, the food stamps, welfare, interstate highway systems, for every $5 the government spends, it actually only has 4. So it has to borrow another buck. And you also have to borrow money to pay on the interest of the 16.7 trillion you already owe. Got it? So the government operates on a debt basis, as do most businesses, by the way. This isn't that terribly unique. We're just in a lot of debt. And so in order to keep the government going, they have to allow themselves, basically give themselves permission to borrow more money. Okay? They have to get permission. Basically, you write a budget every year, the Congress does, to say what you can spend, but you also have to ask permission of yourself to raise your credit limit, because that's what's going on here. The United States has the biggest gold standard credit card on planet Earth, platinum credit card, U.S. platinum credit card, that's worth $16.7 trillion. And the United States government saying, hey, we need to raise that limit. We need to raise it to $17 or $18 trillion. This happens on a regular basis, by the way. This isn't even news. This happens consistently. As long as we've been going into debt, we've been saying about every 6 months or year, we need to raise the credit limit. How much can we borrow from ourselves on our credit card? So they're trying to raise the government credit card limit. Got it? And again, that's usually standard operating procedure. But this group of fringe Republicans / Tea Party / conservatives, whatever you want to call them, has said, we're not going to allow that to go forward either. Hell, if you can't even pass a budget to keep the government going, then you sure as hell aren't going to raise this debt ceiling thing. And again, the argument would be along the same lines. We need to stop spending all this money. We need to get ourselves out of debt. We need to be more fiscally prudent. That's the argument they're making, and it's a decent, logical argument to make. But here's the problem with it. It indeed might crash the whole financial system because unlike other countries around the world, and I don't like to pick on other countries, but unlike countries like Cameroon off to this way and Ghana off that way, or Kazakhstan way off that way, or even Russia to a certain extent, if they default on their debt and they decide they're not going to pay their bills anymore, it's a ripple in the world market, and people will be like, that kind of sucks because you owe us money, and it's bad news for their economies, but it's not going to be earth-shattering. But here's the deal. The United States is the world currency standard. The US dollar is the world currency standard. And if the US government doesn't raise the debt ceiling and doesn't allow itself to borrow any more money, then it's going to run out of money that it has to pay back to all the people it's already borrowed from. Does that make sense? It's essentially, if you had a credit card and you're at your credit card limit, you could say, hey, look, I actually have to pay my bills, including the credit card bills. So can you raise my limit another $1,000 or $2,000? I'm going to get my house in order. I'll fix it. I'll be able to pay everybody back. Your credit card company may say, sure, go ahead. With the intent that we trust you, you're going to pay us back. The U.S. government's now saying, hey, we need to raise our credit card to $18 trillion to keep paying back the other $17 trillion we owe and to keep the house in order and keep it running. And if the U.S. government itself, the Congress says, no, we're not going to let you do that. And this is what the Tea Party wants. They're saying, no, we just need to stop borrowing money and fix everything ourselves. Well, that's fine. But they don't have the money to do it. And even if they could do it for a month or 2 or 3 months, which is what some are speculating, they can't do it indefinitely. And worse than that, you would have to start slashing even more government stuff. And maybe that's what they want. But that's going to then affect the United States economy. Right now, it's in a tenuous economic recovery. The United States government has been pushing money into the economy to keep it going. Well, that would stop. And you have now a kind of snowballing effect of, okay, well, the government's going to spend less money. That's going to affect government programs. It's going to affect government investment. It's going to affect the economic rollout. It's going to affect everybody because just like you at home, if you had a credit card and you went over the limit and they wouldn't lend you anymore and you couldn't pay it back, now you have a bad credit rating. And that's what we're talking about with this whole credit ceiling thing. The United States, if it can't borrow more money, if it can't raise its debt ceiling, it won't be able to pay its stuff back, and its credit rating will go downhill just like yours would. Just like yours would. If you couldn't pay back your debts, everybody would say, I'm not lending that sucker any more money. And that's the thing is the United States doesn't necessarily need to borrow money from people. We print these things called treasury bonds. They're basically IOUs. They say, hey, look, you buy $1 million. Hey, China, buy $1 trillion worth of U.S. government bonds because they're a very safe bet. And you know what? They are. Treasury bonds are the safest bet on planet Earth because the United States is solid, because everybody trusts it, because everybody knows no matter what happens, if you had $1 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds, the United States will eventually pay you back for that with interest. So it's a very safe bet. That's why the U.S. dollar is the world standard. We're a very safe, secure bet for investment. And doing this credit default, not being able to pay your bills back by the U.S. government, not allowing yourself the flexibility to raise your debt limit to pay your bills back, now affects your credit rating. And people all over the world start looking at the United States saying, wait a minute, that's not such a safe bet. What the hell's going on with that? That's not cool. Are they in the future going to be able to pay me back if I borrow $500 million from the U.S. government? I'm sorry, lend $500 million to the U.S. government? Is it fluid? Is it a dynamic enough economy to keep going? Because now it's getting up to $17 to $18 trillion worth of debt, and now they're saying they're not going to be able to pay me back. Wait a minute. Now this is a global affair. And even if, again, if the Tea Party fringe wants to believe that who cares, we should do that anyway, that's fine, dudes, but here's the deal. And this is what I want you to understand. By the way, I'm not pro-Obama or pro-spending money or pro-borrowing money, but here's the reality. When you go bankrupt, when you go over your credit limit, when you can't pay your creditors back, what happens to you? No one will lend to you anymore. Okay, that may or may not happen to the U.S. government, but I can assure you that the people who will lend to the U.S. government once their credit rating goes south, it's a higher risk. If you don't have confidence in the U.S. government to pay you back, then you might lend them money, but it's a higher risk, and you're going to charge them more for that, meaning the interest rates are going to go way up. Meaning the U.S. government, in order to borrow money, is going to have to pay more money to borrow more money. Meaning all the bills start going up. So it's a panacea that these fringe are talking about, we'll just stop borrowing money, everything will be fine. No, it won't, because your credit rating is going to go south. No one will lend you money. If they do, they're going to gouge you. Basically, think of it like a loan shark. The only people going to lend you money are loan sharks, and they're going to charge you a shit ton of interest to do that, which means your bills are going up anyway, and your credit rating is destroyed, and possibly confidence in the U.S. dollar is shaken worldwide. Now, that's the thing I'm going to end on. So what? What's the big deal? Well, the United States is awesome, and one of the reasons it's awesome, and it's the world's largest economy, is because it is the world standard for money. The U.S. dollar is the standard. This gives the United States government, the United States period, a lot of flexibility in shaping world policy, but also digging itself out of holes. The U.S. dollar is the standard, and the U.S. prints those dollars. So the U.S. can, whenever it wants to, tweak policy nationally and internationally by printing more money. It can also tweak policy by selling more treasury bonds, as I've now suggested. So the U.S., because it's the world standard, has a lot of flexibility to help itself and the world economy if it wants, but help itself first. What this fringe element doesn't realize is that by destroying the credibility of the United States, they are now risking destroying the credibility of the U.S. dollar, destroying the U.S. ability to manipulate its own currency, to borrow money from other places and affect the rest of the world, because this will affect the rest of the world. If this default happens, and by the way, I don't think it's going to. No, most people think that even these insane fringe people are going to be brought around by the Republican Party at some point to be more sane and say, hey, dude, you can't do this. Okay? You're going to trash the whole system. If this were to happen, okay, availability of money becomes much more difficult. The United States will not have the money to invest into its own economy. Interest rates for lending will go way up for the U.S. government and for everybody else in the economy. Everybody in the United States, all other businesses. And business people will be the first to tell you, that ain't good. If credit becomes harder and harder to get, that's harder and harder for all of us to run our individual businesses as well as the government to run its business. So this is pretty much bad news for everybody, and that will make the U.S. economy shrink, maybe badly, who knows. And that's why the whole rest of the world is looking at this saying this is a horrifically bad idea. Horrifically bad idea, because if the U.S. economy shrinks, then they stop buying stuff from China, which means the Chinese economy shrinks. And if the Chinese economy shrinks, then people in Thailand and Vietnam and Taiwan who supply stuff to China, their economy shrink. So this is why you have a domino effect. If the U.S. economy goes south because of completely human-made decisions, nothing else is going on here. This is a political battle within the United States with a fringe group of people that now have the power to have a domino effect affecting world economies all over the planet. And that is why the world looks at this and says, WTF, what are these people doing? Why are they toying with a already fragile world economy? And that's not the worst of it, friends. Let me end with this. Point 3, okay, so we did the why the government shut down, what this debt ceiling stuff is, and then point 3 is, what are the real costs here? I've already talked about some of the costs, the government not operating, and credibility, but that is point 3. It's a credibility thing on a global scale. You could start to see countries, and this has already started to happen, who say, you know what, the U.S. is gridlocked beyond control and beyond fixing. We don't want to put all our eggs in that U.S. dollar basket anymore. We're going to stop investing in U.S. bonds. We're not going to buy U.S. debt. And in fact, maybe we shouldn't even be pegging our currency to the U.S. dollar. Maybe we need a different world currency altogether. Maybe the Chinese yuan should be the world currency. China's much more stable. Maybe the European Union's euro should be the world currency. They're kind of more stable, but not that much. But serious talk has been underway for years, actually. This isn't even new. But this is more reason for other countries, other world powers to say, I'm not paying attention to the U.S. anymore. They're finished. They're finished. So the United States monetary policy takes a big hit. The U.S. dollar credibility is going to be hit worldwide. You could see a move away from the U.S. dollar as the world standard. And I've already talked about how that's disastrous for U.S. policy and its flexibility with its policy. But you know what's even worse? What's also worse is that this is quite frankly, this is a big hit to democracy. People in China are looking at this right now going, this is why we're not going to do democracy. Look at you people. You're gridlocked. You can't do anything. You're tanking your own economy. Why? Because of democracy. Now, I don't really think that, but the Chinese do. And they're saying, this is why. That's a terrible system. No one should ever do democracy. Look at America, the richest country in the world that's tanking itself intentionally under democratic processes. So it's very problematic for the dollar, for democracy, but also for U.S. credibility, period. Confidence in the government, I should add, too. All of us are now so sick of the government. We all hate the government. Hell, half of the U.S. is probably sick of democracy at this point. So democracy taking a hit, foreign and domestic. U.S. dollar taking a hit, foreign and domestic. But opportunity costs need to be factored in here as well. And what I mean by that is, specifically in the international realm, because of this catastrophe at home, self-inflicted U.S. catastrophe, Barack Obama has canceled all of his foreign meetings, including one to ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Yeah, you know that. A big up-and-coming, dynamic economic grouping in Southeast Asia. And so he couldn't go there, couldn't talk shop, couldn't meet with other people. U.S. influence was not present at this meeting where Japan was, China was, 13 Southeast Asian nations were, Australia was, India was, the U.S. wasn't. So the U.S. is now starting to take a hit in other arenas, even outside of economics. While he was there at this meeting, Xi Jinping, president of China, he showed up and he inked probably $1 billion worth of business deals with ASEAN nations and talked politics, and he was the golden boy of the whole meeting. Meanwhile, our leader wasn't there. I'm not faulting Barack Obama, by the way. He couldn't really leave. But I'm saying, look, you have to think deeper of the opportunity cost, both economic, but also political, that the U.S. is now starting to pay, and even culturally, that the U.S. is starting to pay because of this self-inflicted debacle. The dollar taking a hit, democracy taking a hit, U.S. foreign policy taking a hit, the world economy is probably going to take a hit if this stuff continues to fracture and fray the American way of life. And that's all I got here from the Gulf of Guinea on the U.S. government debacle. Actually, I should tag in one more thing. A lot of people say, oh, that's cool, boy, but that's how democracy works. I agree. And we'll just vote the bums out. I mean, why don't these people just vote out these fringe elements? In closing, that ain't going to happen either, and that's why the Republicans can't reel in this ultra-right-wing fringe. Meaning there's so much money infused into U.S. politics now, so much money from interest groups that aren't the Republican Party, okay, or the Democratic Party. Any individual interest group can fund a candidate, and they do. So you have radical right-wing and radical left-wing interest groups that can fund individual candidates around the country. Doesn't matter where they're from, doesn't matter if they're congresspeople or running for president. Interest groups have so much more money now, they can just say, well, we want this person, even though they're crazy, and we're going to help them win in this small congressional district in Texas or Arkansas. Whoops. And because of the infusion of money and also political gerrymandering, that is drawing districts that fit exactly, they're all Republican or all Democrat, what you've had is now worst case scenario that this has all come to fruition here in the 21st century, in that these politicians who I'm calling radical fringe, of the left or the right, have no impetus to negotiate because they're not going to get unelected. All of the people in Congress right now, even the ones that are holding up the government, even if they hold up the government so badly the government collapses and world calamity ensues, those people will be voted back into office because their little district is 100% Tea Party. That's how they got there. And their 100% Tea Party folks are going to say, yes, we voted for that, and yay, you're saving us. You're the only voice of reason in Congress. So even though you helped collapse the entire government, we're going to vote you back in. So specialization of political units in America to tailor fit the political party, Republican, Democrat, Tea Party, Green, whatever, on top of the money being filtered into the U.S. system through interest groups that is not aligned to anybody anymore. So it used to be back in the day, the Republicans would say, okay, well, look, you get a bunch of money from the Republican National Conference Committee, whatever. So look, right-wing nuts, even though you are radical, you're still Republican. And so when we say so, you get in line and vote the way we want you to vote. Most of the Republican leaders now don't want this catastrophe either, but they have to kind of pander to this group of radicals because they have no choice. Because if they say, hey, look, radicals, you're going to vote for this budget, we're going to pass it, the radicals are going to say, no, we're not going to. And you have no power over us. And that's true. The Republican nor the Democratic Party have any control over their fringe anymore because their fringe doesn't need them. The Tea Party fringe, or say the Green fringe, they don't need the Democrats or the Republicans. They'll get their money from special interest groups and they'll remain quite secure in their nicely little carved out home district that's virtually 100% in agreement with their policies, whether the policies are good or not. So there's no voting the bums out, I'm afraid. To me, it looks like it's time for a complete retrenching of the American system. I say we go to a parliamentary democracy. Woohoo! If we had a parliamentary democracy, everybody would have been fired already. It would have been awesome. That's just me. But for now, from the Gulf of Guinea, off the coast of Ghana, party on. I hear Tech's doing awesome. Go Hokies, and we're out.